All right, so let's call it order the April 1, 2025 meeting of the Lawrence Township Board of Supervisors. Ask everyone to stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us to our comment period. Is there anyone wishing to be recognized? No takers. Public Works Director, Mr. Jones.
Good morning, thank you. Just an update on some projects, Birdie Mill Road Bridge, works progressing on the crossroads side, working on the, getting ready for the abutment there. Haven't started on the far side with dismantling the old abutment. HK is also asked to use the upper parking lot right there on the Birdie Mill Road for, one of their office trailers. Apparently they're having internet connectivity issues down at the bottom of the hill. So they want to move up to the top of the hill. They're also having some, the county has some concerns with the office that they've provided for their construction manager. So they're looking at the possibility of maybe putting one of the office trailer for the inspectors up there as well. So looking at this as an opportunity for us to get.
How often are the county inspectors there?
Yeah, it's the county. It's the county.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're there. I mean, they're on site, you know, pretty frequently, but as far as their office,
Yeah.
apparently it doesn't, what they've provided technically doesn't meet the specifications. So.
I know it's a given too, but check the real estate picture, make sure that
We videoed the roads and like I said, we're working with them as best we can so that when the time comes, we've got a reason for an ask.
Thank you.
So. Continue working on both the sidewalk projects. Community center concept plan. Mike, can you pull those up? After our last work session, Tony, Mike and I met to kind of discuss this concept and just maybe tweak some of the ideas. You go to A first, Mike.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things we were talking about is, you know, Mike had originally shown stormwater management facilities along Park Avenue. So we asked Mike to kind of to get rid of those, to add additional parking and just look at the orientation of the building. So Mike came up with two potential solutions. This is one with the building actually facing west, I guess it would be. And all users would use primarily use that common driveway, the main entrance for both, for all facilities, for the community center building, for the pool building and any, you know, park or community center users. Then we also looked at option B, which rotates the building 90 degrees and faces it towards Park Avenue. I think this gives us an opportunity to kind of push the building, tuck it into that little nook a little bit, take better advantage of the property, and also kind of separates the traffic patterns. So you've got the community center, which in this concept, I would envision the vast majority of them using the kind of the secondary entrance, especially if it's drop-offs for, you know, underneath the canopy. And then that would separate the users for the pool, so that we wouldn't have that, you know, at peak times, we wouldn't have that conflict of uses and that influx of traffic at any given time. So this is, the three of us kind of agreed that this is our preference. I think it gives us that Park Avenue facing the visual.
I love this orientation just because it's a better view from the road.
Exactly right. We're not looking at the side of the building, we're looking at the front of the building, which I think is helpful.
And the other thing I would say architecturally then, because the only reason I like the first one I liked from the standpoint of creating almost the courtyard effect for a common space between the community center, the circle, and the pool, which, you know, for festival that line. So I would only just say when we're working on the architecture of the building, that yes, everybody always focuses on the front of the building, this is gonna be seen from all four sides and be exposed on all four sides.
Right.
So even if there's almost a secondary front, if you will, on the side towards the pool, so that you have that same visual aesthetic when looking at it from there, and potentially an access portal and things along that line, so that you can get both, best both worlds. I agree from a circulation standpoint and a visual from the roadway, this is the superior one.
That
But
was my-
internally, we might wanna focus a little bit on that too.
That's fine.
Comment with the side orientation, make the side over the front.
Yeah.
So that it's a little visually good from the main road, so, either way, but I really do like this, it's even traffic, I think it's gonna work out with this there too.
I think one of the other benefits is, having the rear of the building facing the ball fields and the community center. It's, you've got that expansive view.
Yeah.
That's more. I think it's more conducive for, that upper floor viewing and the view shed from looking at, from those meeting rooms and any of those other, rooms that are upstairs.
Are we still having the possibility of access to the back, the bathroom, stuff like that, someone right there?
Yeah.
One thing that.
Yep.
Overhang, you know, that
Yeah.
trail connections.
Right, exactly right. And that's what the other thing we asked Mike to do, based on Stephanie's concept for the sidewalk along the property. We just incorporated the sidewalks and the connection to the existing trail. And again, we're more focused on the orientation of the building, all the other, the traffic circle and those kinds of things, all that can be tweaked as we move forward with the site design, but we just looking at more of the concept of how the building's laid out, relative to the site and make sure everybody's comfortable with that so that we can then move forward.
Mike, can I see the other option again? I also like this one perfectly, I just want to compare them, see anything else out of this. This one has the extra exit too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does, yeah, it has a secondary
No,
entrance.
I definitely like the second one. Another comment, and I would ask, Ken as well, from a park board perspective, we talked before, obviously, in our codes, we have islands and stuff for parking lots, and I can understand their safety reasons, we want to be safe. At the same time, we also have our fair festivals there, JC's use it, we have the Lions, and all the community events that we actually use that whole area. We think that's adequate for.
Yeah, we're looking-
rides and everything.
We're looking at possibly pushing the fair further into the property and utilizing the parking area as the parking area for the fair.
Okay,
So, yeah, that's under consideration. I appreciate your comment.
no, I mean, wonderful for handicap parking.
I think smaller size gatherings may still end up being in the parking lot, but the larger fair, it's going to push further.
And that is, you've got two parking areas, you one on the left for that, for an event, and the one on the right for parking and vice versa, and that.
It addresses,
segregated. Yeah,
addresses two issues. I mean, we're decreasing the amount of parking spaces in the auxiliary lots that we've used for the fair over the years. So we need to find extra parking somehow for the growing attendance. So it kind of works.
And things like the chicken barbecue, that be an issue either way, so.
No.
So we'll get a lot of great use out of that. In fact, would benefit more, I think, with design.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think that's the Park Avenue facing building, they say gives us an opportunity, you see that little notch where the property extends, it gives us an opportunity to push that as far that way as we can, even if we offset the canopy.
Yeah.
You
it
know,
doesn't have to be centered for good architecture either.
right.
Yeah.
So I think it gives us a lot more opportunities to open things up, take advantage of space, and still gives us some room over there, like you say, for scouts and for the day camp and for whomever to just, I think Mike's showing a little pavilion over there as well, so utilizing that property, and I think part of the key to doing all this is reorienting the baseball field. So that gives us an opportunity to open up both sides of that to utilize that property, better utilize that property. So,
Would vehicles have access to that rotary? Or is that just for walking?
the
Cars, vehicles,
circle,
like, yes,
yeah, that would be for vehicular
As a
access.
full drop off.
Yeah.
Cool.
I just saw that little, it looked like something was drawn across there, maybe prohibiting.
That's a crosswalk.
Swim team drop off in the morning, that will go a lot smoother than
Yeah.
circle.
It's kind of what they do with daycare, essentially, or the camp.
This is
They
horrible, yeah.
make them circle.
I mean, let's go.
So, well, I'm glad you're all in agreement with this concept because, MKSD is actually working on the interior design of that. We have a meeting. We have a meeting on Thursday just to review the interior layout and see what they've come up with, so. We're moving forward.
Yeah, right.
Like that.
I'll let you know when it's done. Just an update on some grant projects, the traffic adaptive project, that's the TST grant. Everything's installed. The system went live last Tuesday. And we had our 30-day test meeting, final meeting, and the 30-day test began last Wednesday. One of the things to remember with the new system is that it does take a little bit of time for it to recognize that there's a problem. It doesn't want to overreact. So there are parameters. I think it's 3 full cycles, uninterrupted cycles, before the system will make any timing changes. So it could take 6 or 7 minutes before it recognizes that there's a problem and it needs to adjust, whether it's timing, cycle length, whatever it is, to accommodate the increase in traffic on any given phase. And then that doesn't. Yeah, it's not as, as instantaneous as anybody would like it to be, but it's from what Deputy Chief Moyer told me on Friday is that, he noticed a market difference coming in on eastbound Main Street in the morning from his previous commute, so. Seems to be working, so just asking everybody, 30-day test is on now, so if you notice any issues or any hiccups, just please let me know so that we can communicate that to the project team and see if we can get it resolved or figure out if there's actually an issue. So what's going to happen is that as the system continues to tweak the timings, at the end of the 30-day test, those timings are actually going to be used for the system permit. That'll be sufficient enough time for that to be the new baseline, and then everything will be adjusted from there. So that all that information will be entered into the system, and then that will be kind of, if there's a hiccup that it needs to go back to the square one, that's what it'll go back to. So it's had 30 days to kind of develop that, the timings for the system, rather than just doing manual counts and things of that nature. So
that, I guess on a rolling basis, does it keep updating? Like, or is it just, that's gonna be it?
it does, and I think there are other, the system's pretty complicated, that I think there are parameters that you can set where it will constantly adjust.
Yeah.
But there are limits, there are constraints that are put in the system, so it will only go so far. So, but yeah, it continually analyzes the system and the traffic to make adjustments.
And when you say after 30 days, that's say like the day, basically like a whole days where the traffic starts changing at the time that feels the best,
Right,
and then it adapts from there.
correct.
It's like,
We're noticing a big difference already, 113 and 63 from like the Walmart signal to 113. We were saying it used to take 2 or 3 cycles,
Right,
and now they're getting there.
Yeah, that's what-
And it's flushed.
yeah, Corey told me that last week, so hopefully that continues.
Because I know that came last year.
There was a hiccup yesterday morning coming in. A couple of my guys were late to come in that way, but I'm not sure if that was
Yeah,
just.
the westbound left turn arrow is too long. And so there was nobody going straight.
Right.
So that's been addressed. Or at least it's catching it. With, I think it's like 2 or 3 cycles. And if it's a persistent problem, then it changes. Which is awesome, faster than it used to be.
Yeah, that's great.
But all it takes is, one preemption or somebody at a crosswalk, a ped signal, then it kind of, it has to kind of go back to where it started and then go through the whole process again. So it's not perfect. It's just, but it's a lot, I think it's going to be a lot better than what it was. So. So I think we talked last time about the America 250 PA mini grant for AEDs in the park. So it's a $4,000 grant. We're looking at 4 locations: Alderfer, Roth, Chuck Reed, and the community center. And I was able to get the Rotary Club, Lions Club, and the JCs all to agree to participate in the project, so. We'll duly recognize them for their contributions and, with the township doing the installs, so, I think that's gonna be a nice project for us.
Is there any training required for them, or is that basically the direction? Good.
It tells you what to do.
And actually, I know, like, we've got our, there's your, like, if you get one, like, I know we'll get it from the community center, we'll send it to the True Blue, it's a QR code, and it's like it's a self-training, like,
Okay, yeah.
to get ahead, it's like a 10-minute,
Okay.
just so you're not looking at the first time.
Right.
Pull it out of
Yeah,
the box type
A
thing.
better comfort level,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So,
Yeah, the diagram, seeing it.
And their voices telling you.
Yeah.
So update on some department activities. We had an advertising issue with our base repair contract where it didn't comply with the second class township code. There was a snafu on the papers end of things, so we had to re-advertise the bid for award at the mid-month work session for this month, so that's coming next time. I've spent a significant time on trail maintenance. I think we discussed, we had an accident on one of the trails, and so we've taken a lot of steps to, sever tree roots. We've ground down the high points. We're doing the hot fill mastic and sealing all the wider cracks, even sealing the smaller cracks with our little crack machine, sealing machine. So it's taken a lot of time. We've got a lot of trails. It's a great thing, but it's something that, we haven't spent enough time in the past on maintaining, and so we're trying to get back in the good working order and then keep it that way moving forward. Camp Wawa Dam project, that's we're kind of turning an eyesore into an amenity. So we've created some steps going down into the creek. Poured a little walkway and, added some rocks to stabilize things. So I think it's going to be a nice feature once we're done. Gearing up for mowing season. Our seasonal and summer staffing levels are where we need them at this point. We're doing flagger training today with Franconia and Upper Salford Townships. The only other thing I have, well, a couple things is, Liam Simpson was supposed to do a presentation this morning for his Eagle Scout project. He did storm drain medallion installations throughout section of the township. We had a little scheduling snafu, so we're going to try and reschedule that for a future work session. So that'll be coming. And then I know Stephanie has a couple of issues to discuss about upcoming grants and existing grants.
Good morning.
Yep.
I think the first item is a follow-up to the last time I was in front of you with the Oak Drive right turn lane. I did provide our final design proposal. So just briefly, that will take us through essentially using everything we've done up to date and preparing the final design plans, as well as bid package. Obviously we would advertise through Penn Bid. I did want to note that design, we will include any accommodations for the sidewalk and the ramp design as part of the package. So that when it does go to advertisement, we can include those items as an alternate, and determine if at the time the funding is available to either include them or not. As you recall, the grant will cover primarily the right turn lane construction, drainage, things like that for that improvement. But I think it would be beneficial to at least include the sidewalk as an item, and then decide if it can be accommodated or not, and design it all at once, be more efficient that way. And then, let's see. It would also include, obviously, the contract administration and carrying through grant administration and coordination as well. So it's within what we were expecting the range to be, a little below that for now. And so at this point, I think we would just be looking for approval to move that forward to keep it on schedule with the grant award that was issued a month and a half ago.
Few questions on the process, with class 1 excavation, class 1D excavation, they make up a considerable portion of this budget, and I was just curious, what is the basis for these? Like, have there been soil variance conducted that confirms the clarifications?
So the class 1 excavation and 1B is typically a saw cutting excavation. And class 1 is essentially excavating your dirt roadway, anything that's in that area of the pavement widening. And they're not cheap unit costs. I understand that. But again, keep in mind, these are estimates based on historical data of recent projects of similar size, similar quantities, similar nature. So their prevailing wage, and those all have an impact on the unit costs. But once it's advertised, that would be ultimately the cost that, for the contract itself. So again, these are estimates based on the best information we have available. And it will take into account, grading for the widening for the right turn lane, but also the grading associated with the curb installation and then anything beyond the curb in order to accommodate a sidewalk at the appropriate slopes, longitudinal grade, etc.
And then I guess, my other question regarding estimates then for the utility relocation, they have an estimate of 80,000. I know we've recently been talking about, I've learned more about utility relocation. What do you anticipate? What is the process for managing possible cost overruns for utility relocations? Or if we discover more utilities, or if we, and what about any delays, perhaps?
Yeah. So part of the grant only allows you to put a line item in for above ground utility relocations, which is why you would see pole relocations on this estimate. They do not account for underground utilities. We're not allowed to show that as part of the grant estimate and in the grant requirements. I can't explain why, but that's that's a rule of the grant program, most of the grant programs. We are allowed to list utility pole relocations, and those will include any above ground. We know in this project there are 4 poles that are within the area that would need to be improved. In the past, typically, if a utility is in the township right of way or PennDOT right of way, they are within that area, they're required to move on their own dime because they're in the right of way. It's a little different with municipalities. If the utility has and can demonstrate property rights to be in that location, then they have a right to be there and they would be entitled to some level of reimbursement for their relocations. That has often not been necessary on most of the municipal projects that I've been involved in, and certainly the ones in Lower Salford. Generally, the municipalities the utilities have not come and sought reimbursement from the municipalities when those poles need to be relocated. The caveat to that is we then have to wait on their schedule because they're not getting paid to move them. So some projects where they are getting paid might take preference or priority. What I will say is that from early on in the design process, and we've already done a PA1 call in the early stages, so we know what's out there, generally know what's out there. We have preliminary responses from each of them. And at this point, the poles are primarily what we would see as being impacted. We're not assuming really any other impacts to utilities. And now keep in mind, those poles are going to have a lot of lines on them, different facilities. And part of our design process is utility coordination. We have meetings with them. We send out the plans multiple times. We get their responses back. We get their schedules. And we do everything we possibly can to make sure that they work with us on the project schedule. Now I know Old Deford Road Bridge was clearly, a challenge with the utilities. We had gas lines. We had a lot of other things that were part of that project, and it takes time. But I think in this case, they will tell us, PICO will tell us, they have a 16-week lead time. So from the time that contract is awarded, we will develop the schedule and we'll put in their 16-week lead time for those pole relocations. That doesn't mean we can't do other things. We can, but we know that those will be built in to the overall project schedule. So 16 weeks, 4 months, we're looking at, those are the impacts to the overall, the timeline of the schedule. So right turn lane widening, curb installation, not that significant of a project. It will take time because of the poles. And that would be built into the overall contract length for the, for the bids.
Yeah, well, they wrap, and they pull over, that's the whole, and that's 16, 18, 20 time, so.
And that was my thing. I wasn't sure if their delay would affect this grant or not, even if it's not our issue. You know what I mean? So if they're delayed for the relocation of facility poles, will that affect the grant at all, or us financially?
So the grant has a 3-year timeline. And it will expire usually at June 30th, the end of the fiscal year, but it'll be June 30th of 2028. So because of the prep work that's already been done, the survey's already been done, the preliminary layout's already been done, we're already, I would say, well through our preliminary engineering portion. We've looked at the alternatives, we've come up with, the plan is the plan at this point. Now it's going to be the details and the bid package, and that can all be done. I don't foresee that taking much longer than, I don't know what I put in there, but that's a this year project, right? We can get to that point. And I think we were looking at probably advertising over the winter time and looking at construction next year. So you build the 4 months in for the poles and the work, ideally we could be done the project by, this is 2025, by the end of 2026, early 2027, if I'm remembering correctly from my scope. Let me bring that up. But the point is there's plenty of time in the grant schedule to meet the overall project schedule. I don't foresee that being an issue.
That was my main question, though. I don't have any other questions on the budget. Thank you for all your work on this. I did have one more question overall. The erosion and sediment control, ESC, will be held on site, but it won't be submitted to the county unless the disturbed area exceeds 1 acre. I was just curious,
Correct.
in place to ensure this compliance and prevent any environmental impacts if the area remains under 1 acre.
So there's rules that we have to follow with regard to NPDES permitting and ENS control measures and plan approval. And this is a standard requirement and process that we follow with the conservation district. And we have written documentation from them that as long as it's under 1 acre, obviously we don't need the NPDES, and that the plan has to be as part of the project. It will be approved, developed by an approved experienced designer, obviously for ENS controls, but they don't typically review that plan on a project of this size, right? Because this is such a quite a bit smaller project. It was reviewed, for instance, with Alderfer Road Bridge. That was a much more substantial project, much more increase in acres of disturbance and so on and so forth. But this one is a very relatively minor area of disturbance, and it would not need to be reviewed by them, but it does need to be on file and part of the project for implementation.
Thank you for all your work. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? To make a motion to authorize the execution of the design proposal for the Oak Ridge right turn lane improvement project.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carried.
Thank you very much. And then my second item is to discuss the next round of MTF grants, which are due this July, July 31st, 2025. Joe, Holly, Grace, and I met last week to discuss project ideas for the upcoming round of multimodal fund grants. And the first one that we talked about, and the one I think that we came to consensus with, is the 113 Maple Avenue Paterno traffic signal interconnect and path connection. And I guess just as a brief history for this project, the traffic, it would be a proposed traffic signal installation at 113 Maple and Paterno. And the project has been preliminarily developed over the past several years. We've really been on hold the last few years because of funding. A warrant analysis has been submitted to PennDOT, but that's kind of where we're at this point because they need a funding commitment letter. And we've been seeking different funding sources over the last several years with limited or no success, I'll say. County programs, LSA, and I forget if there was a third, but we've submitted it a few times. It was real close the last round with the county CTP program, but it wasn't selected. And I think as you'll hear me say in the past, new traffic signals are hard to find funding for. There's Green Light Go, for example, won't allow a new traffic signal installation, allows your upgrades, things like that, but it won't allow for a new traffic signal. So multimodal, it does meet the program requirements for multimodal. And given we've submitted other multimodal projects in the past, like the Oak Drive right turn lane, and that has gotten funding, I think we're recommending potentially, putting in for this project this time because it does meet the program requirements, and we don't have another project that, is also maybe favorable over this one. And it's one we've been trying to seek funding for, obviously, for a number of years. Multimodal program has a cap of $3 million. Very rarely do you see $3 million awarded to an individual project, but more in that $1 million range. So this estimate previously in 2022 was in the $700,000 range. I grew it to 2025, very rough for this discussion. So we would be looking at that $775,000, $800,000 range for construction. That would include the new signal, that would include the interconnect, which would get you down to Letterack. And that would include the small trail connection on the Maple Avenue side, linking to the existing system. We would expect a local match roughly around 115,000. Much of the design budget is still sitting there from previously that we have not used because we've only gotten through the warrant analysis. We have the survey of the intersection. We have a lot of that in place. And while you could submit with no local match, I think at this, we talked about allotting the project development of that 115 roughly as a local match to help demonstrate, I guess, the need for the project and supporting the project. As you see, MTF often comes back with those reduced or partial awards, and then you're committing to a local match at that point. So showing the local match may have a better chance at getting the full amount of the grant request. Again, these are things we've learned over the years dealing with DCED, but it's food for thought. That being said, it also could be rescoped if needed. So as we talked about with the right turn lane, when you have a partial award, you get an opportunity to rescope your project to meet the grant amount that would be awarded. So if you were to take out the interconnect, let's say you got a partial funding of $500,000 and you took out the interconnect, which is roughly, I think, $240,000. So that would be an easy thing to remove, but still have a project that could be implemented with the new traffic signal. The trail itself is very minor. I think we're at $40,000 or $50,000, for the little trail connection, and may not even be that much, but there are, there's a bit of a grade there. So again, it's an easily rescoped project if need be. So I think that's an important point when you submit an application, to have an idea if you don't get all of that you're requesting, can you still have a viable project if you get something less than that? And for this one, the answer would be yes. So that, is there anything else I missed? Joe, Holly, Grace, with regard to this intersection?
This intersection meets warrants for the city.
Okay, I would say, I know we've talked about it in 2022, I really, and I'll take a look at those words, but I really don't see the need for a single. I have been addressed by people specifically in 2022, I think it wasn't Ken, it was Dave, I know we were here, somebody else was here to say, hey, go put one there. Since 2022, I have driven through that, I just wrote down last week, each day, at least 6 times. You guys know I drive my son to school, my girls to school, where I go pick them up. And I think, on official tests, I've never sat there for less than 2 minutes, all sorts of times and days. If there's a need, if there's a safety concern, what's that?
So less than 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, more, yeah, I haven't sat more than 2 minutes. Thank you for the question. Only 7 minutes. No, but, for me personally, now, I know we talked before, Keith, you mentioned about pedestrian crossing. we're looking at building, you know, one at Landis, 113, not far up. We're gonna do that, you know, connector crossing, we have options there. I live obviously not too far from there, playing 4 kids and I across the street all the time, 113. I'm not saying it's an advisable thing, but I do think if we have other options to cross, we can find other options, but I don't see. That's my personal opinion. I'm curious to hear everybody else.
Traffic signals aren't installed on personal opinion, they're based on science and engineering. And when it meets warranty and we don't install it, that puts us at risk of violating those established standards. So while I appreciate it, and you know, maybe you don't feel like it needs to be there, the science shows, the engineering shows that it's warranted today. You know, if you don't want to put it in, I guess that's the exposure you have to be willing to accept.
Well, and clearly, you know, obviously that is something, you've heard me through the years, if it's means safety things, go with it. I know in 2022, I did get a copy of that. How many other intersections do we have that are in a similar situation and similar reports as this one? I would ask, you know, I don't, if it's saying, hey, we have major need for this.
We tend not to do warrant analysis on intersections that we don't believe need a signal, because when you do the warrant analysis, that invites that exposure. You're acknowledging the fact that a traffic signal belongs there to the extent that it needs one. Therein lies the problem. So, for example, I think we've held off doing a warrant analysis at Morewood and Main Street up in Burnfield because in all likelihood, that warrant will be met, those warrants will be met, and a signal ought to be installed. So we haven't accepted that exposure because we haven't done that warrant analysis. That doesn't mean that if we did it, it would require it. So while there may be a few intersections, we have been progressive, maybe more progressive than most townships, in monitoring our traffic flows. The police are very helpful in, you know, hey, there's an abundance of accidents in this location, you know, you want to consider it, you know, right turn without stopping, right? We take proactive stances on these types of traffic measures. So I think we're in a great position from a township's perspective. We try not to take on more risk than we might ought to. And like I said, the warrants are met for this intersection. We've added a bunch of houses, right? Right next to this intersection. And you know, to the extent that it's needed and it's warranted, we ought to at least consider it.
Remember when we used to erect signs, dangerous intersection ahead?
We don't do that anymore,
Cheaper than fixing it.
perhaps.
Well, I also, in the opinion, we don't need one there, but I personally don't want to see it there.
Right.
But, if we have to have it, we have to have it. But it's-
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if this is liability.
And I feel that, you know, I go through it a lot and it functions fine, I don't ever wait all that long. I also recognize it's an awkward, geometry, because you've got the, you know, it's almost like Cameron coming around the bend, and then you're coming up off of Maple and coming down the hill. It can lead itself to some awkward movement depending on speeds and judging speeds. And fortunately or unfortunately, for whatever situation you're gonna look at, it was improved when Turner Drive was put in for the width of having multiple lanes and turn lanes and everything. It's set up for a signal, which makes the crossing of it as a vehicle without the signal somewhat more challenging, because you have multiple lanes to cross just to make your lefts coming and going from that, which, you know, when it's warranted, that's the toughest part. I don't think any of us looking at it for traffic signals if we need to. But this almost strikes me as, except for maybe Mr. Bergman, but I think it's also one of those high visibility intersections that, you know, when you're looking at it. I would go along with the grant. I'm not looking to, you know, if we can't get the grant money, I don't see that we have the opportunity to spend this kind of money out of our own pocket for something.
No, and again, you're getting $115,000 match, you're getting $700,000-800,000 worth of improvement. So,
Well, I like the interconnectivity up to,
well, the traffic's going along the
Yeah.
board. You're getting that as damage. You're getting some.
I think that's one of the key, you look long-term, is that this is the step that's almost kind of needed in order to get the, you know, all the interconnectivity up to Ladder Rock. Letterack right now, I think, is our problem intersection with traffic. So if we get the interconnectivity to that, it opens the door for the adaptive, system, along that corridor as well to improve, overall traffic flow into the township.
And would that be part of this, or that's future?
That is part of it currently.
Well,
that's expected to
well, they
go-
The fiber optic interconnect, so they'd be able to communicate, but it wouldn't be the adaptive.
That could be mainly.
Correct, it'd be a different grant program.
But we're not, like, so we don't decide anything right now. So I don't know, so she wants to put it in. But the problem is, there's limits to how much money you're gonna do. So right sizing these projects into a level that we think $1 million is pretty good. We're just under $1 million. We're matching, like, we're checking the boxes that would give us the best thing we get in the line. Start putting more in, right? Get up to 1.2 million. Now you're kind of getting yourself in an area where it's like, they might give you the money, but you're not gonna get enough to do that part of the project anyway, so you're gonna take it out. Steph, you correct me when I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right on. I said, one thing I would want to add to, and this is just for the application prep, which I'd obviously be working with Grace, and we have the bulk of the information already prepared for this intersection because we've submitted multiple applications in the past. Not MTF per se, but LSA and the county and all. So the information is already there to support the development of the application, right? So I think it's really pulling some of the data and the information out of the old applications and working with Grace to compile the application for submission and getting the letters of support and whatnot. But it's not a from the very beginning application preparation. Everything's already available, right, to populate the application. So I think it's a pretty straightforward process between now and July as far as getting an application together to see, how it goes. Because we've had limited opportunities with other grants to fund new traffic signals. And this is the one that, that is been out there for now a number of years. So I think it's a path forward. I will add that the second project we talked about was construction for the phase 1 shared use path that is currently in design. And the reason I think that we were recommending the 113 intersection over the path is that the shared use path has other funding opportunities that could be pursued. Mainly this year, the 2025 TASA program will open, and we've met with DVRPC and the county on that project, and they're felt that it was a very good candidate for TASA funding. And it's meets the dollars for that program as well. So because that one has another avenue to pursue construction dollars with, whereas the Signal project didn't, that's why we were leaning towards that as the recommended project.
Talked about back then, just for the record too, I want to say, this having a light there would actually be advantageous. Honestly, with the crosswalk and all there, I don't feel it's necessary, but I just want to put that out there. I'm not saying, oh, I don't want a light there. When I asked last time and get the traffic study 18 to 22, there were 4 accidents. One, the driver was distracted, one affected physical condition. And I said then too, obviously, if there's a need for it, we do it. But we also discussed briefly about the idea of a roundabout. I know I looked into it for the first time, found that there's only really like 8 points of contact. I know we talked about before, but I think you even mentioned before, Joe, that correct me if I'm wrong, but the county said that this would be an ideal spot based, or somebody said that at one point, based upon how much.
We discussed it with them, did we not, Stephanie?
We did. We discussed it with PennDOT because PennDOT has what's called an ICE evaluation, an intersection control evaluation. So whenever you come in and propose a new traffic signal, you have to look at not just a signal for controlling the intersection, you have to look at everything. And so part of what we've already done is the ICE evaluation, which includes intersection controls such as a roundabout. And there are multiple sheets that are involved in determining if you should be pursuing further evaluation of a roundabout or a traffic signal, so on and so forth. So this intersection, you could continue to look at a roundabout. However, it is going to be much more expensive than the traffic signal. Because as Chris, maybe you mentioned it, it's already set up for that traffic signal configuration. So there's no roadway work that needs to be done. There's no widening, there's no changes in the profile, there's no approach changes that would be needed. A roundabout is going to require that, right? Because you have to slow traffic down going into the roundabout, the angles entering the roundabout, the grade across the circle itself, the approach grades. There's going to be a significant amount of earth disturbance to be able to put a roundabout in that location. And it's going to be, quite frankly, more expensive than the traffic signal. But that being said, there's requirements to look at those alternatives.
If I recall correctly, with our discussion with PennDOT, the grading, especially on the, where Maple goes down so much, was that was one of the issues.
Correct.
Getting the
That-
route installed at this intersection.
Yes, yes.
Would have pushed it, and would have pushed it onto the properties on the other side.
Cross grading,
Yeah,
I don't know how they fix that, if they're 500 feet both directions.
right, and that was pushing it onto the properties that are on the intersection, 113 and Turner. So I think it would have been, we would have had to take that right of way from those properties. The other side is not as big of an issue. It's an open area, but the problem on that side was the grade, because the roadway was down so much.
So the only actually compare with the application,
Let's see if we get the grant.
yeah. I get a copy of the recent study, so I did have the old. Sorry. But I get a copy.
Oh, yeah.
I'll make a motion to authorize McMahon and township staff to prepare and submit the DCDOTF application.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay.
I'd like to go off abstain until I can see that.
One abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is all that I had for today.
Any final requests for Mr. Jones? All right, we are done.
Thank you, Grace, Holly, Stan, and Greg.
It's just got, I didn't want, Keith would climb over the table if I said, how about a roundabout with an overpass? 113. Dave, two geniuses cannot be wrong. Studies have shown. I've seen it. Yeah. And the view from the top of that overpass? Unless PennDOT was involved, then Vista View's gone. Sorry. You are the gift that keeps on giving. Frets and oh yeah, Frets and Yoder, we were doing the traffic studies. The month, it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and one direction was done last week, one is being done this week. Those reports will be merged. I will get them out to everybody. So Stephanie can look at the raw data and interpret, rather than sit on it. Everybody will be looking at the same thing.
Sounds good.
Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have it out.
We're still waiting to hear from the folks who complained about the shade breaks on 113.
Yeah, no additional information. Scott McGill is handling that and has been in touch with the one resident. There's reference to other residents. He's encouraging her to share, please tell us who they are, and we'll get the specific days, times, any patterns, etc. So we're leaving it open until we get more info.
Chief mentioned Brent's Road, the guardrails we placed yesterday.
So that.
You want to get obliterated again?
Definitely it's got the over
I know we mentioned it again last month, but is there any steps being taken? But I mean, obviously, if they're paying for it, they have to keep fixing it. Is there gonna become a time where they'll say, hey, more trucks? We would
Appears to
stop
be
it.
the same designs.
They've told
What's
our
your
traffic
experience,
people,
Doug?
if it would take, because of the slope there. That, you know, moving that just back away from the intersection isn't as easy as it looks, because, you know, they have to put it in something and it would be,
Well,
you know.
the issue is the curb. The curbing that leads to the bridge abutment. They can't just move the guide rail back without moving the curb back. So that's what we met with PennDOT, geez, it's gotta be a year and a half ago now. And, you know, they were gonna look into that, they were gonna run it up the chain for on their design team to try to get it, implemented. And in the interim, they asked us to do some restriping, and I didn't want to do anything that was gonna force traffic or guide traffic further into oncoming traffic, so it's like, this is your headache, you know, you guys have to come to a point where it's, you know, it's not cost effective to keep fixing these anymore, because it's gonna continue to happen. So,
We'll talk.
All right, can we get squiggles, painted on? I really like those.
Yeah, we could get Cosmo Kramer to redesign.
Everyone saw that in the paper.
I worked for the first day.
Okay, anything else? Mr. Buki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for the month of March, we issued 47 permits. We do not have an April zoning hearing board meeting. We had a busy agenda at our planning commission meeting last month. We saw 310 Covenant Lane for the church building addition, 130 Christopher. We saw 841 Main Street and 440 Hoffman Road. So two of those planning commission chose to move forward, and that those two were 841 Main Street and 310 Covenant Lane. So you'll be seeing both of those tomorrow for discussion of waivers only. The April planning commission is actually going to be even busier. We have 5 items on the agenda for April, and I can go through those 5 at our mid-month work session. Okay, and I wanted to mention that PPNL actually contacted the township last week. They are in the early stages of replacing all of the towers that go through the township. So they're going to go from the 4-leg pedestal lattice style tower to the single post style tower, and it should actually increase, they said, the height about 50 feet or so. Cases. So they're actually working on the early stages of surveying and investigation.
They're also just one of my property that is affected, but they're also gonna be looking to renegotiate some of their rights of way with adjacent neighbors. Is they no longer go by distance now, they swing distance of the lines that they're held to from federal regulations. And, you know, they have building covenants that you have to be so far off the easement now, they can reduce that, but they need to make the easement a little bit bigger, so it's sort of like a compromise in between. So you might hear that from some of the people who are owners along there, they may be looking to renegotiate our, you know, because we own some of the open space for the events as well.
And that's actually all I have to read.
All right, any questions for Michael? Mr. Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item, the manager report the review of the March 5th, 2025 minutes. If anyone has any questions, comments, changes.
Oh, it's like we didn't catch it before the very end. In the public comment, Supervisor Shelley thanked that you the public works crew, not that public works crew.
Oh.
I would specifically thank the artists.
Yes, that's right, not that one over there, not the.
The next item is the review of the agenda for tomorrow evening's meeting. There are 3 items of business, 310 Covenant Lane, preliminary final land developments for discussions of waivers only. And 841 Main Street amended final land development plan discussion, also for discussions of waiver only. And the final is a motion to approve fire police assistance for Commons and Township for the Commons and Community Day on Saturday, May 10th. Nothing further.
Do we have a need for executive session today?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So with that,
Just one more thing,
Sure.
I did look real quick at my email, Stephanie, I did find the single warrant analysis for that. And I remember having all this information around about, and I remember them laughing, I never do so much about it, I got all that information from your warrant. It does say that it was a strategy viable here, it specifically says the intersection has a necessary number of through turn lanes to accommodate a traffic signal roundabout would require roadway modifications. But it does go on to say the safety and all that. Then there's literally, as we come down further, a breakdown, costs, safety regulations. So it was discussed. We do have options. I don't know if you know, and are all aware of this perhaps as well. I know it's a different board, but we did break down what a roundabout will do, what will be. That's what gave me the idea of going out there. So I feel like that. Yeah. And it even says in here on the end, I can send it to you, I'll send it to you, it has roundabout pricing, yes, it does require a road modification, but it does go on to say what a single, if we do a traffic light, what the modifications would be for that as well.
good. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Move in a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Everyone, bye.
Thank you.